Today on Hebrew Grammar Help, the final binyan, Huf'al. And today I'm talking about the regular conjugations of Huf'al verbs. So, binyan Huf'al G34 Shlemim. This is the last of the binyanim. There are 7 binyanim, and I have done all the other 6 before this. So, with this video, you will now have on my channel all of the regular conjugations of all 7 binyanim. Just like pu'al, huf'al is a strictly passive binyan. The huf'al verbs are the passive of the hif'il verbs. And so because of this, we don't have a shem po'al, an infinitive. We don't have a shem pe'ula, which is the verbal noun. And we don't have any imperative forms, any command forms. And it is certainly not imperative that you have seen any of my other videos, although it would be odd if this is the first binyan that you are trying to learn. But if you've learned the other binyanim some other way, then that should be fine. This video is not really resting on any other videos. It's just that huf'al, being a passive binyan, it's not very common. And so why would you want to learn the least common thing first? You want to learn, the more common it is, the sooner you need to learn it, because you're much more likely to use it and see it. So I hope you know that this video is going to be full of templates. Whether you've learned the other binyanim from me or whether you learned it somewhere else, you should know that verbs are made up of a shoresh, which has kind of the basic meaning of any word family, and a template, which is an actual, like a grammatical structure that shoresh fits into, so that you can create a word that can be used in a sentence. And all of the templates in Huf'al, this is just like pu'al, all of the templates have an oo sound towards the very beginning of the word. And in traditional spelling, this oo sound is depicted with a kubutz, the 3 diagonal dots that go underneath the letter. But modern spelling uses a shuruk instead, which is a vav with a dot next to it in the belly. So of course we don't normally write modern Hebrew with the kud, and so it usually just ends up looking like a vav. But this is pretty important in modern Hebrew, because without that vav there, it's not going to look like a huf'al verb, and it's going to cause some confusion. So for that reason, I always write it, when I'm making my templates, I always write it with a shuruk. Alright, so let's get started. As I mentioned, there is no infinitive form, which is usually the form that I start with. So we are going to move right into the present tense. And as always, present tense has 4 templates. We've got masculine singular, feminine singular, masculine plural, and feminine plural. All of these templates start with a mem with that oo sound. So the way I write it, it's going to be a mem with a shuruk. And then they have the 3 shoresh letters. That first shoresh letter always has under it is a schwa, so it doesn't get any vowel sound that goes with that first shoresh letter. The second shoresh letter has a hardening dagesh, and the hardening dagesh means that it only goes on a begad kafat letter. So if you have any other letter besides bet, gimel, dalet, kaf, pe, or taf, you are not going to put a dagesh in there. And of course, modern Hebrew speakers do not put a dagesh no matter what, because it's part of the nikud system. But we need to remember that if there is a bet, a kaf, or a pe in that position, that it needs to be pronounced like it's stop sound, B, K, or P sound, instead of the fricative sound, V, Ch, or the F sound. Alright, and that is where the commonalities among all four forms ends. For masculine singular, that second shoresh letter has a kamatz under it. And then it has the third, then we write the third shoresh letter, and then we're completely done. The plural forms also have a kamatz under that second shoresh letter. And then the third shoresh letter is followed by the appropriate vowel for the plural ending. So in the masculine plural, there's a chirik under the last shoresh letter, and then a yud and a mem sofit, and it sounds like im. The plural masculine ending sounds like im. And for the feminine plural ending, there's no vowel underneath it because there's a chola maleh after the third shoresh letter, and then a taf, and it sounds like ot. And these three forms, the masculine singular and the two plural forms, have their stress on the final syllable. And then singular feminine is a little bit different. Under that second shoresh letter, we get a segel. And under the third shoresh letter, we also get a segel. And then that third shoresh letter is followed by a taf. And because of those segels, the feminine singular has the stress on the second to last syllable. And of course, this is always easier to understand when we use a sample shoresh. So the sample shoresh that I'm going to use is dalet, bet, kof. And this shoresh has all kinds of things to do with gluing or sticking, like adhering. And so devek itself is glue, and lehadbik means to glue or stick something onto something else. And so we're now going to talk about the huf'al verb in the present tense. And so we get mutbak, mutbeket, mutbakim, and mutbakot. And this means it is glued, he is glued, I am glued, we are glued, you all are glued, stuff is glued. Alright, let's move on to past tense. Past tense, all of the verbs are going to start with a hu sound. So it's a hey, and then with that oo vowel, again, it's going to be a kubutz if you're writing traditionally, or a shuvuk if you are writing with the modern style. And this is easy to remember because the base form in past tense is always the third person singular masculine combined the binyanim. They took the shoresh that has to do with activity or verbs, pei, ayin, lamed, and then they stuck it in to the third person singular masculine past tense form, and that's the name of the binyan. So that should help you be able to figure out what the past tense is supposed to sound like. And then, that's just one form. You've got all the other forms, but you can just add on your suffixes, or for the other third persons, they're not too difficult to figure out once you've got your one base form. So if we think about that third person past tense singular, we think about the fact that we've got a binyan called Huf'al. You start with the hey, you put your u vowel, whether it's a kubutsu or a shuruk, and then you have your first shoresh letter, which has no dagesh in it, and it also has a schwa under it, so no vowel sound. And then you get your second shoresh letter, and that one has a hardening dagesh, just like it does in the present tense. And at this point, that is the end of the commonalities between all of the forms. And at this point, then, we have to break the forms into two groups. We've got first and second person, both singular and plural, and then third person masculine singular also goes with this group. And then so the members of the other group are just third person singular feminine and third person plural. And so with this first group, the bigger group, what happens is the second shoresh letter gets a patach under it, sounding like a. And then we have the third shoresh letter. Now, if we're talking about the third person singular masculine, we're done now. We don't put any kind of a vowel underneath that last shoresh letter because it's the last letter of the word altogether, and so it doesn't need a schwa. But all of the other forms in this big group, so the first person and the second person, singular and plural, they're all gonna get a schwa under the last shoresh letter. And then what you're gonna do is you're going to put the appropriate suffix to match the subject of this verb. So ti, ta, t, nu, tem, and ten. The third person singular feminine and the third person plural are a little bit different because of their suffix, which is a stressed suffix. So what happens is that second shoresh letter also gets a schwa. So we've got two letters with schwas in a row. And then the third shoresh letter is going to get the appropriate vowel, which is the ending, the suffix of that particular person. So for third person singular feminine, that third shoresh letter gets a kamatz, and then there's a hey after it. And if it's third person plural, there's just a shuruk after the third shoresh letter. And again, it's always easier to understand with a practice verb. So using the same shoresh, dalet bet kof, and we have hudbakti, hudbakta, hudbakt, hudbak, hudbeka, hudbaknu, hudbaktem, of the forms are basically going to have their prefix that matches their person. So for first person singular, it's an aleph. For second person, it's a taf. For third person, it's a yod, except for third person singular feminine, which has a taf. For some weird reason, third person singular feminine always matches the second person singular masculine. So the he form always matches the ataf form. And then first person plural is a nun. Alright, so after that first prefix letter, you're going to have your u vowel. So again, a kibbutz if you're writing traditionally, a shuluk if you're writing modern. And then you're going to get your first shoresh letter with no dagesh and with a schwa. And then your second shoresh letter with that hardening dagesh. So the same dagesh, the one that only goes on the bagad kafat letters. And so that's what they all have in common. Now, if the particular form does not have a suffix, so this is going to be first person, both singular and plural, second person, singular, masculine, and then third person, singular, both masculine and feminine. All of these forms do not have a suffix, so that second shoresh letter is going to get a patach, and then we're just going to have that third shoresh letter, and then we're done. But if the particular form we're talking about does have a suffix, then it's going to be a little different. The second shoresh letter is going to have another schwa, just like the first shoresh letter. And then the third shoresh letter is going to have the correct vowel that goes with the person. So the second person singular feminine gets an E vowel. So it's going to be a chirik underneath that third shoresh letter, and then a yod after it. And then the second person and third person plural both get a shuluk at the end. So that third shoresh letter doesn't get anything underneath it because it gets the shuluk right after it. Remember, with the cholam and the shuluk, you can't have a vowel underneath and have the cholam or the shuluk. Alright, so let's put in our favorite shoresh, dalet bet kof. And we are going to have udbak, tudbak, tudbeki, yudbak, tudbak, nudbak, tudbeku, and yudbeku. And these all mean I will be glued, you will be glued, he will be glued, etc., etc. Alright, so now you know all of the conjugations of Huf'al verbs. And if you're interested, you go to my channel, you can see all of the regular conjugations of all 7 binyanim. Alright, so that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, please leave it in the comments. Hit like if you enjoyed this video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell if you want to see more. Lehitraot, Papa Ama Ba'as.